We are Group 4,
We will be tackle about
Language and History.
Our first reporter will be
Mary Grace Pagalaran. She will be discussing about
historical timeline of noteworthy linguistics from Aristotle to Lothe, Joan de Saussure, and Chomsky.
And the second one is Michael John Ubas. He will discuss historical development of language, evolutionary or Darwinian.
The third reporter will be
Sheila Galinet.
and her topic is
Historical Development of English from Anglo-Saxon to Global English.
and we're down to the fourth reporter, which is Honey May Lamoko. She will discuss the two topics
the English language family and
Proto-Indo-European.
Our fifth reporter,
Near Crescalin Gomez. She also discussed two topics.
Proto-Germanic, and
Old English, Middle English, Modern English.
so we're now down on the last reporter.
Who is
Manalyn Nanali.
and her topic is
Changes in the English Language Grimm's Law Great Vowel Shift.
Good day everyone, my name is Mary Grace Pagalaran, and for today I will tackle about the historical timeline of noteworthy linguists from Aristotle, Lothe, Joan de Saussure, Chomsky. Model communication. Aristotle developed a linear model of communication for oral communication, known as Aristotle model of communication. This is considered as the first model of communication and proposed before 300 BC. It is also the most widely accepted among all communication model. Aristotle model is mainly focused on speaker and speech. It can be broadly divided into 5 primary elements: speaker, occasion, speech, audience, and then effect. The Aristotle communication model is a speaker-centered model, as the speaker has the most important role and it is the only one active. It is a speaker rule to deliver a speech to the audience. The rule of the audience is passive, influenced by the speech. This makes communication process one way, from speaker to receiver. Robert Lothe, 1787, Prescriptive Grammar. Following the curious description of Robert Lothe, 1787, as a philologist more inclined a melancholy than to mirth, the Oxford Companion to the English Language, more that Lothe's name has become synonymous with prescriptive grammar. MacArthur, 1992, Lothe's short introduction to English grammar was first published in 1762 and was frequently reprinted during the 18th century. Linguistic prescription on prescriptive grammar is the attempt to establish rules defining preferred or correct usage of language. These rules may address such linguistic aspects as spelling, pronunciation, vocabulary, syntax, and semantics. Sometimes informed by linguistic purism, such normative practices may suggest that some usage are incorrect, inconsistent, illogical, lack of communicate, or low authentic value. They may also include judgments on socially proper and politically correct language use of the following. A grammar of the Persian language. In 1771, he published a grammar of the Persian language, which proved to be one of the best grammar texts ever published in English about a language the Western world considered exotic. For the project, Jones employed numerous literary quotation, and his goal of producing a scholarly work that would be morally uplifting and that would be entertain as well as instruct. The work, which went through several editions and translations, provided a model that later language scholars would follow. Ferdinand de Saussure, 1857-1913, Linguistic Science. Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure is widely considered to be one of the forefathers of both linguistics and semiology, which is the philosophical study of the interpretation of signs and symbols. Most notably, Saussure introduced the idea that every word is a linguistic science, which consists of two components, the signifier or the phonetic form of a word. Crucially, Saussure articulated the arbitrariness of linguistic sign, the phonetic form, and the underlying concept of the word dog have no natural link and instead are the product of social interaction. The arbitrariness of meaning and form is fundamental tenet of modern linguistics. Noam Chomsky, 1928, Universal Grammar, probably the best-known name on this list. Noam Chomsky is famous for many things, but within the realm of linguistics, he is most famous for his idea of universal grammar, which possesses that all languages have the same underlying structure and simplify use different words and sounds on the surface. Humans, Chomsky, are biologically equipped with a language acquisitions device, which endows us with the innate ability to learn language.
So in continuation, I will going to discuss the historical development of language, the evolutionary or Darwinian. The evolution of language. So, the evolution of human language is closely connected with changes in two organs, essential of the use of language. For about 2 million years before Christ, Homo habilis and Homo erectus have developed the brain fit for basic linguistic tasks. From Homo archaicus, Homo neanderthalensis to Homo sapiens, 400 years before Christ, discovered that with the advent of Homo sapiens, developed a vocal tract that gradually ready to use some sort of speech. But since the evolution of biological prerequisites that Homo sapiens uses of vocal tract and language is gradually unclear. So in a simple elaboration that language before is not that clear unlike our language today. So there are many hypotheses on how our language began. The first one is the gestural hypothesis, which means that language began by the use of gestures in primates and hominids. So examples of primates are monkeys, apes, humans. So they use gestures to communicate with others. For example, hand gestures, body gestures, that in every gesture they produce, it has an equivalent meaning. So primates may lack the ability to speak a language, but they are not complete incapable of learning to use signals to communicate. A chimpanzee proved that primates possess the capacity to acquire communication through the use of symbols and body. So the next hypothesis is the vocalization hypothesis. Since for a long time it was understood that ape and monkey vocal communication involved only a fixed repertoire of inarticulate calls under limited voluntary control, it was thought unlikely that language would have evolved from this. So the next hypothesis is a neural hypothesis. Holds that the language resulted from gradual increase in general intelligence documented by increasing brain volume. So when our brain got bigger, so the language also has evolved. Language developed as a human species evolved. So development of language sets us apart from our closest relatives, the chimpanzees. One theory is that hominids started by grunting, hooting, and crying out, and this gradually developed into the language we use today. 6 million years ago, the hominid and chimpanzees lines diverged. the size of the hominid brain increased and developed over time, while chimpanzee's brain remained the same. Another theory is that language began as signed language and then switched to the vocal modality. Ten of thousands of years ago, first spoken language was started in Africa and then spread across the world because of the migration of our ancestors when they left in Africa 70,000 years ago. The evolution of human language. So what is Darwinian linguistics? It is a socio-biological approach to the study of language. Studying a language as a product of nature, it is interested in the biological origin and development of language. Since the evolution of language changed more, the major theories began to evolve also. So the five of the oldest and most common theories of how language began are the ding-dong theory, the bow-bow theory, the poo-poo theory, the la-la theory, and the last one is the yo-he-ho theory. The ding-dong theory. The original sounds people made were supposedly in the harmony with the worlds around them. An example sound is boom. The next theory is the bow-wow theory. Language began when our ancestors started imitating the nature sounds around them like moo, meow, splash, cuckoo, and bang. The poo-poo theory. This theory holds that speech began with interjections, spontaneous cries of pain, surprise, and other emotion. The la-la theory. The Danish linguist Otto Jespersen suggested that language may have developed from sounds associated with love, play, and song. The yu-he-ho theory. According to this theory, language evolved from the grunts, groans, and snores evoked by heavy physical labor.
After many evolutions and invasions today, many languages are being spoken across the world as the medium of communication out of these English languages. So English is one of the fifth or the finest language that stands in common for the people to communicate. Since the ancient period until now, the English language is portrayed into different perspectives. So based on the invasions of Britain by other countries, Romans were ruling Britain for almost 400 years. So it was started in the 5th century when three Germanic tribes such as Anglo-Saxons and Jutes invaded Britain via northern Germany and published out the existing Celtic inhabitants to Scotland. So language is derived from the various group of dialect, but how it is named as English. So in older era of the English, the word English is pronounced as English as it is interrelated to the Anglo tribes. So place called as Anglo, which is the origin of Anglo-Germanic tribe. So it was continued until the invasion of Duke of Normandy, and by the invasion they conquered England in the 10th century. In the early 11th century, due to the dominance of French, so the upper class people conversed in French and the lower class people with English, and it was named as Middle English period. But again, in the 4th century, English people raised their domination in Britain, and after that dominating period, it was the birth of modern English period, and it is in the 15th century, in which lead to the development of new word, phrases, grammar, and the dialect of London. It is because standard in here first dictionary was published. The only difference between the early modern English period and the late is the vocabulary. It has been progressed from the dialect of Germanic settles in the 5th century to a global language in the 21st century.
Good day everyone, my name is Hanime Lamoko. Today, I am going to report about English language and Indo-European language family. So, So you probably don't know this, but just as every human belongs to a particular family, every language spoken in the world belongs to a family. The same rule applies to the English language as it belongs to the Indo-European language family. Now, what are language families? A language family refers to a group of languages that have developed from a common ancestor called a proto-language. Although the ancestral language of languages is not always known, it is possible to identify many of its features by using the comparative method that can be used to demonstrate the family status of many languages. So there are about 147 language families in the world, according to the 16 editions of Ethnologue. However, since there is limited knowledge of the language spoken in linguistically diverse areas of the world, such as Africa, the number of language families might be more than 137. Of the 147 language families in the world, Niger-Congo, Austronesian, Trans-New-Guinean, Sino-Tibetan, Indo-European, and Afro-Asiatic are considered to the 6th largest language family by language count. So this language family contains at least 5% of the world language each, and when combined, they account for 2/3 of all languages in the world. So, in the European language family, the English language, a Western Germanic language, belongs to the Indo-European language family. The Indo-European language family is spoken in the most of Europe, European settlement, and Southwest and South Asia. So today, the Indo-European language family has about 2.6 billion speakers, which constitutes about 45% of the world's population, making it the languages family with the most significant numbers of speakers. So the language in the Indo-European language family are divided into 10 main branches, which are explained below. So Germanic. The Germanic tribes live in the South Scandinavia, the North Germany in the middle of the first millennium. However, they began their migration and expansions sometime in the 2nd century BCE. The language that belong to this branch include English, German, Yiddish, Persian, Faroe, Dutch, Danish, Swedish, Norwegian, Icelandic, with Gothic being the oldest in the branch. Next is Indo-Iranian. The Indo-Iranian is made up to 2 sub-branches, which are Indo-Aryan, Indic, and Iranian. Indo-Aryan are the languages that have been spoken in the now northern and central India and Pakistan since 1000 BCE. Hindi, Bengali, Sinhals, and the many dialects of Romani all belongs to Indo-Aryan languages. So while Iranian languages were languages that have been spoken since the first millennium BCE in Iran, Afghanistan, modern Hungary, and Turkestan, Persian, Pashto, Kurdish, and Ossetic are modern languages that belongs to Iranian languages. Greek. Although having several dialects, Greek remain a single language throughout history, spoken in Greece since 1600 BCE. Italy. Italian, Romanian, Spanish, Portuguese, French, and several others are all languages that belongs to the Italic languages. So, however, Latin is the principal language of the Italic group, which was the original language spoken in the Rome. Next is Armenian. Just like Greek, Armenian remained a single language spoken as early as the 6th century BCE. Speakers of Armenian reside in Armenia and eastern Turkey. Celtic. The Celtic languages were spoken in a wide area of Europe. It includes Spain, Britain, Balkans, and the last centuries before a common era. So there are only a few Celtic languages that were able to survive. They include Irish, Welsh, and few others. So Balto-Slavic. So Balto-Slavic tribes occupied a large area of Eastern Europe, Poland and the state of Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia. At the beginning of the Common Era, these are spoke either Balto or Slavic. Next is Albanian. Albanian, which remained the language of Albania's present-day republic, has been spoken since the 15th century CE. Next is Tocharian. Although now extinct, the Tocharian languages were spoken in the Tarim Basin, which is now present-day northwestern China. During the first millennium BCE, the Tocharian languages had two distinct languages, which are East Tocharian or Torfanian and West Tocharian or Ho-Chen. Next is Anatolian. Just like Tocharian languages, the Anatolian languages spoken during the first and second millennium BCE in Asian Turkey and northern Syria are now extinct. The best known Anatolian language is Hittite. The official language of Hittite Empire others were Lydian, Palaic, and Lovian. And additionally, several other poorly documented languages have gone extinct, of which enough is known to be sure that they were Indo-European, which does not belong to any of the groups listed above. For example, Phrygia and Macedonian. Also, there is way too little knowledge of some other languages to certain if they were Indo-European or not. My second topic is about Proto-Germanic. So, Proto-Germanic, abbreviated PGMC, so also called the Common Germanic, is the reconstructed proto-languages of the Germanic branch of the Indo-European languages. So, Proto-Germanic eventually developed from the pre-Proto-Germanic into three Germanic branches during the 5th century BC to 5th century AD. First is the West Germanic, second is the East Germanic, and then third is North Germanic. So which, however, remain in contact over a considerable time, especially the Slavonic languages, including English, which arose from the West Germanic dialect, and remain in continued contact with North Germanic. So, a defining feature of Proto-Germanic is the completions of the process described by Grimm's law, a set of sound changes that occurred between its status as a dialect. So, as Proto-Indo-European and its gradual divergence into a separate language, as it is probable that the data developed and this sound shift spanned a considerable time, several centuries. Proto-Germanic cannot adequately be reconstructed as a simple node in a tree model, but rather represents a pace of development that may span close to 1,000 years. The end of the Common Germanic period is reached with the beginning of the migration period in the 4th century. So the alternative terms Germanic parent language may be used to include a larger scope of linguistic development, spanning the Nordic Bronze Age and pre-Roman Iron Age in Northern Europe. So 2nd to 1st millennia BC to include pre-Germanic, so early Proto-Germanic and late Proto-Germanic. So while Proto-Germanic refers only to the reconstructions of the most recent common ancestor of Germanic languages, the Germanic parents language refers to the entire journey that the dialect of Proto-Indo-European that would become a Proto-Germanic underwent through the millennia. So the Proto-Germanic language is not directly attested by an coherent surviving text. So it has been reconstructed using the comparative method. fragmentary direct attestation exists of common Germanic and early runic inscriptions. So, especially the 2nd century AD Weymouth inscriptions and the 2nd century BC Negu helmet inscription. And in Roman Empire era, transcriptions of individual words.
Hello everyone, my name is Neri Crystalline Gomez and I am the 5th reporter from the group 4. I have 2 topics, which is Proto-Germanic and Old, Middle, and Modern English. So, of course, we will start with Proto-Germanic. So, what is Proto-Germanic? Proto-Germanic is the branch of Indo-European language family that includes English, German, Dutch, Frisian, and the Scandinavian languages and Gothic. Proto-Germanic eventually developed from pre-Proto-Germanic into 3 Germanic branches during the 5th century BC and the 5th century AD. What are they? These are the West Germanic, East Germanic, and North Germanic. But let's start with, of course, West Germanic. West Germanic languages constitute the largest of the 3 branches of the Germanic family of languages. The 3 most prevalent West Germanic languages are English, German, and Dutch. Frisian, spoken by about 450,000 people, constitute a 4th distinct variety of West Germanic. Before we continue for our 2nd branches of the Germanic language, can you please give me the definition of these words? In 5 seconds. If your answer is this one, you are correct. So, our 2nd Germanic branches of language is East Germanic. East Germanic is one of the primary branches of Germanic language, along with North Germanic and West Germanic. The only East Germanic language of which texts are known is Gothic. Although a word list and some short sentences survive from its relative Crimean Gothic. Other East Germanic languages include Vandalic, Burgundian, although the only remnants of these languages are in the form of isolated words and short phrases. Before we continue for our last branches of Germanic language, can you please define these 4 words that I have? In 5 seconds. So the first words is Gothic. If your answer is this one, you got it right. So the second words is Crimean Gothic. In 5 seconds. If your answer is this one, you are correct. So the third word is Vandalic. In 5 seconds. If your answer is this one, you did a great job. So the last word is Burgundian. In 5 seconds. If your answer is this one, it's amazing. So now let's move on for the last branches of Germanic language is North Germanic languages. So, when we say North Germanic languages, is used as a comparative linguistics, whereas the term Scandinavian languages appears in studies of the modern standard languages and the dialect continuum of Scandinavian. Danish, Norwegian, and Swedish are close enough to form a strong mutual intelligibility where cross-border communication in native languages is very common. So, Proto-Germanic is the completion of the process described by Grimm's law, a set of sound changes that occurred between its status as a dialect of Proto-Indo-European and its gradual divergence into a separate language. It adequately be reconstructed as a simple node in a tree model, but rather represent a pace of development that may span close to 2,000 years. The end of the Common Germanic period is reached with the beginning of the migration period in the 4th century. So Proto-Germanic refers only to the reconstruction of the most recent common ancestor of Germanic languages. The Germanic parent language refers to the entire journey that the dialect of Proto-Indo-European that would become a Proto-Germanic underwent through the millennial. It is not directly attested by any coherent or surviving text, but it has been reconstructed using the comparative method. So, I want you, if you want to dig it more, I have here the map. As you can see the map here. It is the map of Germanic languages, how it is formed into 3 branches and how it divided into different group of languages. Now, let's move on my second topic, which is the Old English, Middle English, and Modern English. The English language can be divided into 3 basic periods called Old English, Middle English, and Modern English. Old English is the Anglo-Saxon language used from about 400 to about 1100. Middle English was used from 1100 to 1400. And Modern English is the language used from 1400 onward, although Middle English developed out of Old English. There were drastic differences between the two in terms of grammar, pronunciation, and orthography. The main difference between Old English and Middle English can be described as the simplification of grammar. In Middle English, many grammatical cases of Old English saw a reduction and inflections in Old English were simplified. So, Old English is the earliest historical form of English language, which was spoken in England and some parts of Scotland during the early Middle Ages. It was brought to England by the Anglo-Saxon settlers during the 5th century. It was used in Britain from 400 to 1100. Old English has 4 main dialectal forms. It is Northumbrian, Kentish, Mercian, and West Saxon. Its closest relatives are Old Saxon and Old Russian. The grammar of Old English is somewhat similar to Modern German. The word is much freer, but nouns, pronouns, adjectives, and verbs have many inflectional forms and endings. Like any other old languages, it is very different from its modern version. Therefore, speakers of modern English find it very difficult to understand it without study. So Old English vocabulary mostly contained Germanic words. Most of these words do not exist in the modern English vocabulary, as words were later replaced by Latin and French words. So the words with Latin origin such as cleric, abbot, nun, hem, temple, silk, purple, beet, lentil, pear, radish, dew, oyster, cannon, ark, altar, and alms entered into the English vocabulary during the later Old English period. The earliest Old English inscriptions used a runic system, but this was replaced by a version of Latin alphabet from about 9th century. The earliest written work in Old English dates back to 7th century. So, this is the example of English inscription used by runic system. So, now let's go to Middle English. So, by the way, before we continue, can you give me the definition of Middle English? In 5 seconds. Your 5 seconds starts now. And boom! Your answer is correct. I know that this is your answer. What is Middle English? Middle English refers to a collection of the varieties of English and replaced Old English after the Norman Quest in 1066. Middle English developed out of late Old English, but there are drastic changes in grammar, pronunciation, and spelling between these two versions. Many Old English grammatical features were simplified. For example, noun, verb, and adjective inflection were simplified in modern English so as the reduction of many grammatical cases. The dative and instruments cases, Old English were replaced by with prepositional constructions in early Middle English. Everyday vocabulary mostly remained Germanic, but areas such as law, politics, religion, and arts saw an adoption of Norman French vocabulary, although the writing customs varied widely during this period. A standard based on London dialect became established, aided by the invention of the printing press. This standard is the foundation of modern English spelling. Therefore, modern English speaker can understand Middle English better than Old English. Wycliffe and Geoffrey Chaucer are notable writers who wrote in Middle English. So, this is the example. Yes. And now, let's go to the third one, the Modern English. So, what is Modern English? In 5 seconds. Your 5 seconds start now. In yes, you are correct if this is your answer. Modern English, sometimes New English or NE. ME as opposed to Middle English and Old English if it is OE. Is the form of the English language which is EL spoken since the great vowel shift in England, which began in the 14th century and was completed in roughly 1550. And we already know that Middle English is as ancestor of modern English. With some differences in vocabulary, texts from the early 17th century, such as the work of William Shakespeare and the King James Bible, are considered to be in modern English, or more specifically, are referred as using early modern English, or we called it Elizabethan English. English was adopted in regions around the world, such as Anglo-America, the Indian subcontinent, Africa, Australia, and New Zealand through colonization by the British Empire. Modern English has many dialects spoken in many countries throughout the world. But we have different accent. We all know that. So sometimes collectively referred to us as the Anglosphere. This dialect include American English, Australian English, British English, but in British they have 3 different languages, but they called it English, Welsh English, and Scottish English. So Canadian English, Caribbean English, Hiberno English, Indian English, Pakistani English, Nigerian English, New Zealand English, Philippine English, and Singaporean English, and the last one is South African English. But we all know that the best country who speak English is Philippines. According to Ethnologue, there are almost 1 billion speakers of English as a first and second language. English is spoken as a first or second language in many countries, with the most native speaker being the United States and the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and Ireland. There are also large population in India, Pakistan, the Philippines, and Southern Africa. It has more non-native speakers than any other language. It's more widely dispersed around the world and is used for more purposes than any other language. Its large number of speakers plus its worldwide presence have made English a common language. We call it lingua franca of the airlines, of the sea and shipping, of computer technology, of science, and indeed of global communication generally. So thank you everyone. That's the end of my report. And before I end up, I want to leave these sayings according to Geoffrey Chaucer that time and tide wait for no man. It means that if we don't make use of our favorable opportunity, we may never get the same chance again. So, bye. Thank you for listening.
Great day everyone, I am Manilina Nali from English Subi. So today I am going to tackle on how is English language changed through Grimm's law and the great vowel shift. So, is the English language changing? Yes, and so is every other human language. Language is always changing, evolving, and adapting to the needs of its users. This isn't a bad thing. If English had not changed since, say, 1950, we wouldn't have words to refer to modems, fax, machines, and cable TV. So, how did language change over time? So, language is always changing. We've seen that language changes across space and across social groups. Language also varies across time. Generation by generation, pronunciations evolve, new words are borrowed or invented. The meaning of old words drifts, and morphology develops or decays.
What causes major changes in the English language? Language changes for several reasons. First, it changes because the needs of its speaker change. New technologies, new products, and new experiences required new words to refer to them clearly and efficiently. So now let us move on to what is Grimm's law. So Grimm's law, also known as the first Germanic sound shift. It is a set of sound laws describing the Proto-Indo-European or PIE stop consonants as they developed in Proto-Germanic in the first millennium before Christ. First systematically put forward by Jacob Grimm, but previously remarked upon by Rasmus Rask. It establishes a set of regular correspondences between early Germanic stops, fricatives, and the stop consonants of certain other Centum Indo-European languages. So, there are examples of Grimm's law is that the development of the sounds in Germanic languages. For instance, English father is pronounced P, whereas the German word for father is pronounced F. In Norwegian, far is pronounced F, and so does the German word for water. So what is Grimm's law and what does it describes? So Grimm's law defines the relationship between certain stop consonant in Germanic consonant languages and their originals in Indo-European or IE. These consonants underwent shifts that changed the way they are pronounced. So now let us move on to the Great Vowel Shift. So what do you mean by the Great Vowel Shift? So it is a series of changes in the pronunciation of the English language that took place primarily between 1400 and 1700, beginning in southern England and today having influenced effectively all dialects of English. Through this vowel shift, the pronunciation of all Middle English long vowels was changed. Some consonant sounds changed as well, particularly those that became silent. The term Great Vowel Shift is sometimes used to include these consonant changes. So what is the Great Vowel Shift and why did it happen? So the Great Vowel Shift was a massive sound change affecting the long vowels of English during the 15th to 18th centuries. Basically, the long vowel shifted upwards. That is a vowel that used to pronounce in different place higher up in the mouth. So the vowels occurred in, for example, the words bite, meet, mate, boat, and out, respectively. The words had very different pronunciation in Middle English from their pronunciations in modern English.
Thank you so much guys for watching our short video presentation with my groupmates, namely Mary Grace Pagalaran, Neri Casarin Gomez, Hanime Lamoco, Mr. Michael Ubas, Sheila Galanay, and I, Manilina Nali. I hope guys that you have learned something from us and thank you so much everyone. So we are the group 4 with the topic of language and history. Goodbye and God bless everyone.